He noticed her standing there, trembling at the checkout. Her hands clutched a few groceries, and tears welled up in her eyes. The cashier shook her head, saying she didn't have enough money. Everyone in line was impatient, staring and whispering. Then, he did something that would change both of their lives forever. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, and Daniel had just finished a long day at work. The office had been stressful, emails piling up, and his mind buzzing with deadlines. On his way home, he stopped at the small neighborhood grocery store to grab a few essentials. Inside, the store smelled faintly of fresh bread and ripe fruits. The sound of the rain tapping against the windows added a soft rhythm to the otherwise quiet shop. Daniel wandered through the aisles, lost in thought, thinking about his own struggles, bills, work pressure, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in despite having friends and family. As he approached the checkout line, he noticed her. A woman in her late 50s, her clothes worn and a little damp from the rain outside. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a small basket of groceries on the counter. Daniel could see the worry etched deeply on her face, the kind of worry that only comes from not knowing if you can make ends meet. The cashier, a young man barely out of high school, frowned as he scanned each item. "That comes to 24.50, he said, his tone polite but firm. The woman reached into her bag, pulling out a handful of coins and a few crumpled bills. Her hand shook, and it was clear she was coming up short. Daniel felt a pang in his chest. He knew that helpless feeling all too well, the anxiety of not having enough, the embarrassment of being judged, even silently, by strangers. He watched the woman quietly apologize, muttering that she didn't have the rest, and the cashier's sigh made the moment sting even more. People in line shifted impatiently. Some whispered to each other, rolling their eyes. A man behind Daniel tapped his foot, clearly irritated by the delay. Daniel could see her trying to smile politely, her eyes brimming with shame. And in that moment, something in him shifted. He stepped forward, and without overthinking it, said softly, "I can pay for the rest." The woman looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She opened her mouth, as if to protest, but Daniel shook his head. "It's okay. Let me help." He handed the cashier the remaining amount, and the woman's hands trembled even more, not from the cold, but from something warmer, something heavier, relief. Relief that came from being seen, being cared for, even if by a stranger. And in that brief moment, Daniel realized something important. Sometimes, a small act could mean more than you ever imagine. The woman, whose name was Margaret, gathered her groceries and stepped outside. The rain had grown heavier, soaking her thin jacket. Daniel followed her for a moment, feeling an inexplicable connection to this stranger. He noticed how careful she was with each item, as though each one was precious beyond measure. As he returned home later that evening, Daniel couldn't shake her image from his mind. He thought about the loneliness that must accompany poverty, the constant struggle to keep life together day by day. The small indignities, the judgmental stares, the silent pity of strangers, all of it weighed heavily on Margaret's shoulders. He remembered her hesitation, the way she had almost refused his help. It was pride mixed with fear, and it broke his heart to think of how many people might pass her by without noticing, too caught up in their own lives to see her humanity. That night, Daniel lay awake thinking about the world's indifference. He reflected on the countless moments where he had been in a rush, too busy to acknowledge someone's struggle. How often had he walked past a homeless person or ignored a quiet plea for help, rationalizing it away? He felt guilty, yet determined to do better. Meanwhile, Margaret returned to her small apartment, tired and cold, but something had shifted inside her too. The shame of not having enough had been softened, if only slightly, by the kindness of a stranger. But the world hadn't changed. Rent was still due, groceries would still be hard to afford, and loneliness still lingered in her small, dimly lit kitchen. The conflict wasn't just external, it was internal. Both Daniel and Margaret grappled with emotions that the world rarely recognizes. Daniel questioned his ability to make a difference, wondering if a single act could really matter in a world filled with suffering. Margaret wrestled with pride and gratitude, unsure how to reconcile needing help with wanting dignity. And yet, in their separate spaces, something quietly powerful began to bloom, a sense of connection, a tiny spark that reminded them both that kindness existed, even in the darkest corners of life. The next morning, Daniel returned to the same grocery store, unsure why. Perhaps he hoped to see Margaret again, or maybe he just wanted to remind himself that small acts mattered. As he stepped inside, he noticed a little bouquet of flowers on the counter near the entrance. A note beside them read, "Thank you for seeing me when others didn't. Your kindness gave me hope." Daniel's chest tightened. Tears welled in his eyes as he realized the impact of something so simple, paying for groceries. It wasn't just about the money. It was about recognition, compassion, and the human connection that often goes unnoticed. Later that day, Daniel ran into Margaret again, this time outside a park near her apartment. She smiled, hesitant at first, then openly, a warmth that reached her eyes. "I didn't know how much I needed that," she said softly, almost whispering. "You reminded me that there's still goodness in the world. That maybe people do care." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He realized that her words carried more weight than anything he had ever done at work, more than any achievement or accolade. In that simple exchange, he found a joy and fulfillment that no office deadline could ever provide. From that day forward, Daniel and Margaret didn't become inseparable friends, but their lives were changed forever. Daniel carried the lesson of empathy into every interaction, holding doors, offering smiles, listening more carefully. Margaret, in turn, held on to hope, sharing small acts of kindness whenever she could. The world hadn't transformed overnight, but in that brief intersection of lives, two people discovered the incredible ripple effect of compassion. One small act, paying for groceries, had grown into a profound reminder that kindness, however small, is never wasted. Sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to change a life. A moment of compassion can heal invisible wounds. Even strangers have the power to make the world brighter. Never underestimate what a simple gesture can mean. Kindness is contagious. Spread it wherever you go.